Now, if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. So let me explain. First off, it's free. I'm not joking, you guys. The Anchor app, it is free to use. Second, there's creation tools that allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Now that's awesome, isn't it? Third, Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard everywhere, you guys, on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and so many more platforms. Fourth, you can make money from your podcast with no minimum relationship. Now, is that awesome, you guys, or what? That's just terrific. And finally, it's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So I have another podcast with Anchor, and I'm just loving Anchor so much. I love it. It's so very easy to use, guys. So why don't you download the free Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started. What's up, you guys, and welcome to the official podcast of Damian Talks Education. So listen up. I am here to talk about all things education on my podcast. So get prepared for some realness and honesty of education as I walk you down through various of topics that's happening in the education world with some amazing guests, to sharing stories relating to education and so much more, because I got you covered with education. So join me on this journey of education with me. Damian Talks Education title, Damian Hears You, a conversation on being a Black man in America. Now, in response to several high-profile deaths of African Americans in recent months, and many Black people are saying that enough is enough. There needs to be change happening in our society now. So as protests has been happening all over the country against systematic racism and police brutality, many Black Americans are describing themselves as being fears, anger, weariness, and all the emotions that we are all feeling. Against about the tragic killings that are becoming all too familiar for all of us. So join me today to have a powerful conversation on what it means to be a Black man in America is KJ Johnson II, which he will join us later on. He's a co-host of Future Educators Talk and a current student at Lamar University. Christian S.L. Padgett, I hope I'm saying that correctly, assistant principal in Atlanta. George Harris, a high school special education teacher in Atlanta. And Andrew St. George, a lifelong resident of Virginia, and who also serves as a professional speaker and author. So thank you guys so much for joining me to have this conversation.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
So, yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I'm going to start with you, Mr. Christian, and I'm going to go down the lines because I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this. So what was your first reaction when you first saw the video of the white cop kneeling on George Floyd's neck while he was saying, "I can't breathe"? And also the video of Breonna Taylor, Rayshard Brooks, Ahmaud Arbery, and so many more. So what was your first reaction to those when you first saw those videos?
All right. So I would say my first reaction was I was shocked. I was in a state of shock. Um, Part of it was you could say I believe it's happening, but I was also shocked at the fact that why is this happening? I think that's where I really was with it. I think I grew afraid afterwards. I mean, yes, I live in Atlanta. It's like a black mecca here, but um, I run a lot. And then after that, I was actually out running. Um, and I've been on edge while running sometimes, especially depending on the neighborhood that I'm running in or running through. And I think that even went back to the Ahmaud Arbery case. So I think that's where I was with it.
And I know personally for me, just seeing it, I was kind of shocked, but then at the same time I wasn't, because at that point, lots of videos was starting to circulate online about the different treatments, how cops and just the injustice, even with the situation with the white female in New York, where she basically stated that she was called cops and lied about the guy actually harassing her, or where the situation was. And so at this point, I kind of was furious and tired. And so at this point, I started seeing a lot of people in Atlanta protesting. And then with Piedmont Park, it's one of the local parks here. They did a lot of protests around that area. And so I said, we have to do something about it. And we have to talk, we have to share your opinion and try to force the movement forward.
Absolutely. What about you, Mr. Andrew?
It's once I actually saw the video, because I didn't see it at first, and a lot of people started talking about it. Once I actually saw it, I was actually disgusted, and for two reasons. One, I was disgusted that it was being videotaped and nobody was trying to help that man. Secondly, I was disgusted because I've seen police push the limits of, or push the boundaries of, what they're supposed to do as far as protect and serve is, as far as protect and serve goes. So I've seen them push the boundaries before, and to know that it's still continuously happening and nothing is being done about it, I was disgusted for those two reasons. And it's again, it's something that we gotta really get in front of, because us talking about it or protesting without any action as to doing something about it, it just really gets us. It keeps us further and further from the solution.
I totally agree. We need to do something about it, change happening. And since what we're doing now, we're having conversations, I want to hear your guys' thoughts. What conversations should we be having with our white friends about racism, the Black Lives Matter movement, the protests, and so much more? So what do you guys think? What conversations should we be having with them for them to understand where we are coming from, if that makes sense?
Absolutely, makes a lot of sense. I'll jump in there real quick. I do have a few white friends that I do talk to about these different things, and I think it needs to become less and less of a debate and more of a education type conversation. Yeah. Again, on both stands, I think that they need to be educated as well as us, and I think we can find some common ground between one another, because I don't really think that they understand why we're furious and why we're disgusted and why we're in such an uproar and why we are focusing on Black Lives Matter, because Black lives have pretty much never mattered. And now that we're so boisterous about it, it's like, well, why are y'all talking about it now? Well, we tried to talk about it before, and nobody wanted to hear it. And they're really pretty much showing us the same type of initiative now. They don't really want to hear it. And when you say Black Lives Matter, then then it's all lives matter, or blue lives matter, or this lives matter, or we're talking about something that directly correlates to us. And I think it needs to be more of an educative type conversation as to, hey, look, here's where, we find fault in the system. Here's where we see us as being divided when we should both be treated equally. So I think the conversation needs to go more of a, in an educative type direction.
Totally agree. Totally agree. What about you, Mr. Christian? Have
I
you
agree.
having conversations?
I like what you just said about not making it a debate. I think when I look back at this, one of my best friends is actually white. And I think about how we've been friends since we were 12. And I sometimes think about the conversations we would have about race at times as teens and how we'll almost get into a debate. And I think that's the first part. I think the second part is also when trying to engage anyone in a very critical conversation, we also got to do it in a way where they also don't feel attacked, because sometimes they don't know how to separate our frustration for what's going on with themselves, even though it may not have anything to do with them or they haven't done anything exactly. It still is a thing of where sometimes our passion can come off as sometimes our passion might come off as a threat. And so just knowing who your audience is, just like I tell anybody, whether you're black or white, and just even in a work setting, always know your audience. Know what's going to trigger them, what's not going to trigger them. So you can know how to phrase things. So sometimes what we're saying is not the issue. And I won't even say what we're saying is an issue, but know how you're going to say it. Know the tone, know the messaging, know the right word choice. Because even sometimes these critical conversations need to happen are people in a place to receive what you're going to say. And I'm not even just going to say friends, I'm just going to say associates in some cases. Because my mom taught me a long time ago, everybody's not your friend. If you got a lot of friends, something is wrong. So I'm even saying associate to an extent. And I think also what helps too is I can tell, like you just mentioned just before, and even just how you talk, there's a certain level of pride that also has to come from us when we have these conversations. But in the same sense of not being prideful, but have a certain sense of pride when you're having these conversations. Be your authentic self, but also know how to convey your message. And I think that will also help it.
For me, I think that it's very important to come in with the understanding that it is going to be an uncomfortable conversation and acknowledge that from both ends. Also, let them know that it's not okay to be respectable to racism. Acknowledge it and, stand up against it. Not necessarily saying being, combative with it, but, take a stance and say, hey, this is wrong, and try to do something against it. Now, with that being said, you also got to highlight the type of things that people overlook normally because it's always been the norm. But the norm does not make it okay. And so you need to have these specific conversations about, what you go through each day and how these things are not fair and why they're not fair.
Totally, absolutely. So let me ask you this, Mr. George. Do you think white families are sitting down right now with their children to discuss how to interact with the police and how to avoid suspicions than black families are having? And if so, if they are having this, do you think they even know how to begin, how to start talking with them about it?
I believe that based on the environment and your situations, there's some white families that don't like the police like black families don't. I think the conversation is not based around race, but mostly presentation. I think a lot of times more white families may talk about, presenting yourself a certain way so you're not targeted, versus for us, it's more of a conversation about, saying this is how they're going to already look at you. And so this is just something historically that we had to always deal with and how to maneuver around it. But I think white families do have these conversations, but I don't think it's mostly around race. I just think it's about, how you present yourself to the police in that aspect.
Yeah. Do you guys want to elaborate on that?
I'm going to say I don't thinking about my own friends or my associates that I've gone to school with, who I've worked with, and thinking about the things that we talked about, I'm gonna say I've never heard of a white person saying they had to have that conversation about how do you interact with the police. Um, because some of them were shocked when I've had to talk about how I get nervous when I get a cop behind me, and it's even to a point where you may not even see the skin color because again, here in Atlanta, you have black people, you have black people that are cops,
Mm-hmm.
but you got people behind you. I mean, you see the cop car behind you. You don't pay attention to the color. You just see the cop car. You begin to tense up a little bit. And I do think that is something that um, they haven't had to have a real conversation about. I'm not going to go to the point of saying nobody has ever had that conversation, but in a general sense, white people don't have to talk about what it means to interact with the police because, again, historically, look at what the police have been designed to do around people of color.
I would definitely agree with that. My thought on it is that the conversation is had in both households. I think it goes into the extent and depth that a black family will have as opposed to a white family. Now, I have two sons, so my conversation is probably very different than somebody else, another family talking to their kids about it, because I don't think they're actually reiterating the fact of, if a police gets behind you, keep your hands on the wheel. Don't reach for anything, and make sure you got your seatbelt on, and like he said, the presentation piece. Make sure you're presenting yourself well, so you're not looked at or not targeted because of your skin color. I don't think that type of conversation is being had, but I think that they both households do talk about, hey, how to handle police if you get in that situation. Now, I think the conversation has to go a little bit further, though. Black families, only because of the narrative and the stereotype that you see when you just turn the TV on. So that is something that presents our conversation has to go a little bit further as a black family as opposed to a white family, because you're not seeing that happen with white kids or teenagers, or you're not really seeing that. It's not posterized all over the TV and media. It's black kids. So I have a 17-year-old. So my 17-year-old asked me about how to deal with police, for the fact that he doesn't even like police at all. Like, now the conversation turns, it goes in a different direction. So granted, I think both have the conversation. I just believe that ours is more in depth, and we really have to pick some parts of that to really give our kids the information and what they need to be out there and survive, even if we're not around.
And I think you just
Yes,
brought up an
absolutely.
important point. Because the thing I was going to add to that is the word of survival. Like when we deal with the police and we interact and have that conversation with, like when I think about my mom and my dad having that conversation with me, that key word of survival is there. Even if it's not the word that's used, that's the theme of it. You're trying to survive. When a white person has to go have that conversation, there's not a thing there of survival. I'm just telling you how you might have to do things, but it's not a thing of survival. We're trying to stay alive.
And
Absolutely.
Yes.
back on that, I think too, a lot of times with the white family, it might be about reputation, don't embarrass me. So this is what you need to do to get out of it and not ruin our name, that type of thing.
Yes. And right before I come with you, KJ, I want to piggyback on what you said, Mr. Andrew, about presenting ourselves. So I am 20 years old. So how, because I talk with some of my friends about this, I am scared for my life. So how should I present myself when I go outside? Because sometimes I will have on a hoodie on and that's not, police. They will see something. So how should I present myself when I go out each and every day so I do not be target?
So I've had this conversation before, because I work with teenagers. So I've had this conversation before, and it all comes down to how confident you are about what you know. So if you're very, very familiar with what your rights are and what the you're out about, and you, I'm not committing any crimes. I'm not doing anything. I know my rights. I know I know what the boundaries are. I know what I'm legible to do. And like the more confident you are about what you know, the less scared you are of police interaction. And I think that's what it comes down to, because like you said before, a cop car gets behind you, you tense up, you're like, oh my God, and you haven't even done anything yet. But it's just the presence of the police that gives you that intimidation, that fear. So the more confident you are about what you know, as far as your rights are concerned, and the fact that hey, look, I'm in the right. I'm not committing any crime. I know what the rules of engagement are. I know what it is. So the more confident you are in that, the better off you'll be, and you'll be less and less fearful when the presence of you're interacting with police.
Yes, thanks so much for that. So KJ, I want to ask you this here, and I asked them earlier right before you came on, and I want to hear your thoughts of this. What was your first reaction when you saw the video of George Floyd's death and also Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery? What was your first reaction when you saw those videos?
What's going on, everybody? My name is KJ Johnson. I didn't get a formal introduction. I'm sorry, I'm trickling a little late. Had some stuff I had to take care of, but now I'm here. But my first reaction to those videos and those news, really, I wasn't surprised. I wasn't surprised. I mean, I mean, I hate to say this, but we're used to it. We're used to it. Just to face the reality of it. Even though it is a terrible thing to say and a terrible thing to see, we're used to it. I mean, especially when I saw George Floyd, and his death reminded me a lot like Eric Garner's death, by the way he was, choked out, even with the knee. We're used to it, and so of course I was hurting for those families. I couldn't imagine the pain that those families were in, and those certain individuals were in. However, being a black man in America, that the question goes from when does it stop to when is the next one, because we've reached that far. Our political leaders have not done anything to change it. They it sounds good, the things that they say. However, they don't. It's never any direct change. They actually, the administration is in office right now. They encourage it, and so we're used to it. I was hurt. I was afraid, because I travel the highways a lot, and I try to limit my reactions to law enforcement. However, sometimes when your foot gets a little heavy on the highway and speed limit 75, and you go a slick 85, 90, you can easily lose track of speed, and boom, state trooper pulls you over in the middle of nowhere. You don't know where you are. You don't know what's going to happen. It's just you and that police officer. Me, a black man in the middle of Trump country with in the middle of the country, with a white police officer, most of the time so I was fearful, but I wasn't surprised, because we've seen it. We're not new to it, but the question is now, what can we do to ensure that this doesn't become normal?
Exactly. And speaking of being a black man in America, I want to hear your guys' thoughts. And I heard from Mr. Christian already. So, Mr. George, what does being a black man in America means to you today, right now,
during this pandemic?
I think being a black man right now, it means working even harder and going above and beyond to show that you can do things. I think right now it's very important to make sure that you're the best in what you can do, so that way that it's not questionable. Although it's not right, I've always been taught that, to go above and beyond and just do what you can. That's why I take the time to make sure I get any type of knowledge that I can so I can apply it, so nobody can question anything that I do, and I'll be ready for a response or however I position myself. And so I believe being a black man right now in America is about just always being ready and trying to stay a foot ahead of your competition. I think that's the big thing right now for being a black man.
What about you, Mr. Andrew?
Honestly, I think it's no better time than right now to be a black man. I think right now is the best time to be a black man in America, only because that, this is a new day and age. Now we're seeing a reincarnation of some of the things that took place in the 60s and the 70s, but this isn't the same type of scenario now. We have more resources, we have more fight, we have more drive in us, we have there's so many more opportunities for a black man now as opposed to 20, 30 years ago. So I think right now is there's no better time than right now to be a black man, because there's so many doors that can open for us as we come together more now, as we're more aware of things and more educated on how to build the platforms that we need to build to kind of put us in a position to where we don't have to endure some of the things that they continuously try to take us back to. So we have the opportunity to really change the narrative, but again, we got to be educated, and we have to make do on the time that we have right now to put us in a better position. Like I said, there's no better time right now than to be a black man in America, because there's so much that you can do as opposed to years ago when they didn't want you to do anything. They didn't want you to read. They didn't want you to write. They didn't want you to learn anything. They didn't want you to know about money. They didn't want you to know about credit. They didn't want you to know about any of the stuff that you can find out about right now and really live a fulfilling life. So I don't think it's a better time than right now to be a black man in America.
And you, KJ?
I gotta agree. Even though we see stuff going on every day that we're in a pandemic that disproportionately affects us more than anybody else. We're in the middle of this modern day civil rights movement. And, I don't know if we're still in this economic thing, and that COVID caused, and even in this uncertain season with this election, when we got a president that's acting a fool because he doesn't want to lead the White House, there's no better time to be a black man in America than now. I actually asked a question the other day for an assignment that I had to do. It was about comparing to a recent modern day event with a past event, and of course I did the Black Lives Matter movement in comparison to the Civil Rights movement. This is just Civil Rights Movement 2.0 with technology, with more exposure, with we're seeing all different the true different, I guess you could say, colors of being a black individual, not just a black man, but a black individual in this culture. You're seeing more than just athletes, more than just entertainers, and different people in power that are black, that do look like us, using their platform to help others that may not have that same platform. So no better time to be a black man in America than right now. And so I gotta agree with it. That was a good point. First, when you asked the question, I was like, I was going to be more on the negative side, but now you said that kind of shifted my perspective on it. Because, when we look at it, prime example, I'm in Texas. Dallas ISD back in June was hiring just black men. Doesn't matter if you had an education degree, doesn't matter if you had a certification, doesn't matter if you had all this other stuff. Just be a black man, apply. You got a job. We'll work on certifications for you. You don't even have to have an education degree. Just have a degree. I'm like, dude, if I was out of college, I would be working in Dallas right now. Because even though I am going for my education degree, but just the mere fact that they targeted black men specifically, we get more opportunity just so companies won't be deemed as racist. We're getting more exposure, so just so bigger platforms won't be deemed as racist. Our voices are getting heard. Prime example, our vote. Come on, like our vote mattered this election, and we're seeing the manifestation of it now. And so it's being a black man in America is no better time to, even though all this other stuff is going on around us, we still, just being a black man, all these different things are going for us, but the media only chooses to show us the negative things. But now, I got the different perspective. Let's look towards positive things. Let's build off that.
Agree, KJ, agree. Now, Mr. Andrew, you said that you have a teenager, right?
Yes, I have. I have two sons.
So, what's your message or advice to black fathers around the world of young black men of how they can navigate this world? So, what's your advice to black fathers of how they can navigate their young black men today?
My message to black fathers, to help them navigate through the world today. Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Okay. My message would be, I would have to honestly say that my message would be, time is all that you really need to provide. Right now, with everything kind of going on with COVID and all the political stuff that's going on that we see on TV every day, like right now, the one thing that I see people saying that they wish they wouldn't have taken advantage of is time. Time is pretty much of the essence. As you can see, these days are going by quickly. Like, we had a lot of stuff happen in 2020, but man, 2020 kind of breezed through. Like, we're just about out of 2020. So time is of the essence. And in saying that, as a parent, father, mother, whatever it is, the time that you give your kids or your family or whoever it is valuable. So as a father, as a black father, time is your best asset right now. Because that time that you have, because many states are quarantined right now, so ain't like you got places to go and people ain't really traveling. So time is pretty much all you have. So the best utilize that time is pouring into your children or your family or whoever it is, giving them that time, pouring into them, letting them know, because. And I don't want to go on a soapbox here, but I think that for many years we use time as an excuse, like, oh man, I don't have time to do this, or I ain't got time to do that, or I'm busy, or now there's no excuse. So having that time and best utilizing that time to get to know those that you may have put on the back burner because you didn't have the time to do so before. So being a parent, being a father, I think time right now is the best asset, and we got to utilize that more importantly, and really hone in and focus on our kids and help, kind of guide them and lead them in a direction that we may have been too busy to do previously. So that would be my best advice. Time right now is your best valuable asset, and use it accordingly.
I like that. I really like that. Now, Mr. Christian, I want to ask you this here. Why do you think some of us, we protest Black Lives Matter, but then we tear each other down in the next breath? Why do you think some of us do that?
I think the reason why that happens at times is for the simple fact that while we might preach Black Lives Matter, I think sometimes the thing is that we forget that we're not a we're not monocultural, if that makes sense. We're not of the same culture. We don't have necessarily the same beliefs. Just because I'm Black and you're Black, we might experience things from the outside world that's similar, but our day-to-day experience may not be the same. And a lot of times, I think we try to group ourselves as one, and sometimes don't understand even the differences that we have. Think about it like this. I know some friends, my friends and I, we can't stand Candace Owens. I almost cursed them when I said her name. We cannot stand Candace Owens. But at the same time, that question came up around her. Like, should we go ahead and bring her back and should we accept her? One of my friends was like, hell nah. But then another one of my friends was like, you got to bring her back. Like, come on, we're all still Black. We still got to come together. So I think it really is a thing of just understanding that our experiences are varied and they're different. And that is okay.
KJ, what do you think?
Goes back to the idea that I mentioned about the different shades of being Black. It just goes beyond, like, the physical appearance. It's about the backgrounds and our experiences. I'm gonna be honest. I didn't grow up in the hood. I didn't have to struggle growing up. And that just seems like the universal Black experience of a Black man. Growing up in the hood, struggle for what you got. I didn't have to struggle. I'm very blessed to have two parents. I have a biological mom, biological father, stepfather, and a stepmom. I'm blessed to have two sets of parents. I'm blessed to grow up in a good neighborhood. But also, I know my good friend, one of my best friends, he grew up, his mom died. It was just him and his sister and his grandmother. And his grandmother's dealing with dementia. And he didn't grow up the way I grew up. But we're the best of friends. And he recognizes that I didn't grow up like him, and I recognize that he didn't grow up like me. And so it goes back to what Mr. Christian said, just having those different experiences. I may look at one thing one way, he may look at another thing another way. But at the end of the day, we're all fighting for the same thing, and that's just for equality, even though if we disagree with each other. Now, there's another dynamic of that I like to call competition. That the fact that, I got to be better than you because you grew up better than me, or, we're going for the same job and my credentials are better than you. But since yours are worse than me, you got to work twice as hard. That whole dynamic of it, and that dynamic of competition or jealousy can also have a part in it. However, being Black is not like he said, a monocultural experience. It's totally different. I could be, like I said, I'd be the best friends with my boy Trey. However, we have two totally different experiences. But there's some things I agree with him, and some things I disagree with him, and we just leave it at that. Even, even when we do get into it like that, you can start to see it come up. But I mean, at the same time, you know, we know how it really is. So at the end of the day, I really think, it's not the fact that, the hatred toward the person. It's just, the difference in perspective and background. But I mean, at the end of the day, we're all fighting for the same thing.
Hmm. Yes. So, okay, I want to ask you guys this here. Did you guys grew up with a father? Did you have a father figure in your life growing up?
I will say yes and no. My birth father was not there for me, um, but my mom's husband at the time, he was, and he still is there for me now. Um, they were together. They got together when I was about 1 year old, and he's always been there for me. I'm 30 now, so for the past 29 years, I've always had somebody to call my dad. So that has been helpful. And then I also have a stepfather, and my stepfather has been around for the past nearly 20 years at this point. And so I would say my stepfather, I didn't like him. I'm gonna be honest, I did not like him growing up. We couldn't stand one another. Yeah, but I will say by the time I got to college, I started to understand a lot of things about him, and he started to understand a lot of things about me. And I will say he has definitely been a father figure.
I've
Okay.
had some.
So I want go ahead.
Oh yeah, just real quick. I've had some father figures in my life. My stepdad, he's been around for, man, about 20, 25 years probably. I still communicate with my biological father. We have since strengthened our relationship. Um, he was absent early on in my life, but we've since strengthened our relationship. But I've always had like male figures in my life. My uncles, my older brother. So they always kind of served as those fatherly roles for me, kind of guiding me and teaching me about life.
So I want to ask you guys this. Why do you think us black men, we don't like to confront our mental health issues? Why do you think that we don't like to open up about our personal, what we are dealing with? So I will start with you, Mr. Christian.
Okay, I think it's as simple as this. I think the reason why we don't like to own our mental health is because it is one of those things that we haven't had to work with as much, considering we've had to work on so many other things that we forget about. It doesn't seem because it's not something that's physical. We tend to not care about it as much historically. Then I also think about it as a sense of a sign of weakness. I think about my own grandfather. My grandfather struggled through some things, but he was not going to be the person that went and got help. Ironically, his name was Napoleon, and he had a Napoleon complex. Um, he always fought for control. He looked for control, things like that. He was very aggressive, very dominant, but at the same time, there were some mental issues there, and he never got it checked out, and ultimately it cost him his life. But I feel like that is one of the reasons why we don't want to be viewed as being weak.
What about you, KJ?
I believe that mental health in the black community, well, black male community, is really a subject that's not talked about as much due to the fact that we don't have much experience with it. With our upbringing, we were always taught to, figure it out, to fight through it, be tough, be strong. Even the dynamic of being weak in society. You know, like I mean, I know some black males that's fought with depression and anxiety, suicidal thoughts. However, they never got the proper help because they didn't want that image placed on them by society. You know, I believe that if you're struggling with mental health, you talk to somebody, even if it's not a professional. Just get it out because there is a thing called mental fatigue, to where we're thinking about it so much, and was building up inside you. Now your brains get tired. Now you can't even focus on the real things that matter, and all that stuff on the inside of you bottled up. Even if just talking to somebody. If it's somebody in the room with you, it doesn't even matter. But really, we just don't have much experience with it. Even in our upbringing, we weren't.
Hmm.
Just like be honest. If you ever told your parents that you were depressed, how would your parents respond? And so those values have been instilled in us throughout childhood. Now we carry with our adulthood. We don't know how to handle it. And so that's what I think.
And you, Mr. George, what do you think? Why we don't like to talk about our issues to each other?
I think a big part of that is a lot of people don't want to share their business. So it's kind of like keep my business at home. And then a lot of times that comes to kind of that can hurt you because it's a lot of weight that you hold on yourself because you're so scared to share because you don't know what people are going to do with the information you give them. I think personally with me, I have personal experience with it. I grew up with a mother that has bipolar schizophrenia. And so mental health has always been a big thing in my family, with my mother going in and out of hospitals and me going back and forth from my father's house to my mother's house when she's not stable. And so a lot of times when it comes to mental health, it's actually acknowledging that there's something wrong and that you can't work through it. You need some outside help. And so I think until we get to a point where we can say, hey, this is not normal and that's okay, and that it's okay to get help, I think that it's going to always be a burden to try to figure out how we're going to be able to have that conversation.
Hmm. Right. Now, here's my final question for all of you guys here. And I want to hear every single one of your thoughts on this here. So, why do we call each other the N word, but we get all upset when a white person uses the N word? So, what thoughts? What do you think of that? Why do we do that? We call each other the N word, but when a white person uses it, we all get upset and angry and pissed off when they use it.
Think,
Go ahead, KJ, my bad.
I bet, appreciate you. I think about it this way. Um, it's like females can call each other the B word, but when a male calls the female the B word, it's a problem. Um, and that's kind of that same dynamic. Honestly, I don't know. I don't have an answer for it. The only if I were to guess, it would be, that word is specifically, tailored to black people, and man, I don't even want to know. I don't want to make folk mad, and when this come out, and so I just don't know. That it's kind of like how you can talk about your sibling, like make fun of them and everything, but nobody else can.
Hmm.
That's not your sibling can. That's how I got like 3 siblings, so I have a lot of experience with that. And so um, it, it's a feeling that you don't know how to explain, but you still feel some type of way when it happens. I personally don't use the.
Yeah.
I try not to use the word as much, um, just because of that perspective on it. However, I just don't have like I know my answer. I just can't put my answer to words.
KJ, I'm gonna help you out real quick. I think this is what it is about everything around that.
Hmm.
I'm not gonna lie, I've used it. I've used it at work when I've gotten frustrated and had to go in my office and go use it about something I've had to deal with and some people. But I think at the end of the day, the reason why is because it is part of our lived experience. Even though we may not know each other, we have similar lived experiences, and that's why we can use that word and why we feel like we can get away with it. Versus if a white person comes up, I don't care how much you think you might be down with the cause, you cannot use that word because you haven't had that lived experience. And your lived experience is everything. And you will never know what it means to be in this color, whether you're this shade or you're lighter than a brown paper bag. It doesn't matter. You could look like Whitley Gilbert. It still wouldn't matter. At the end of the day, we have this lived experience. And also think about what you also mentioned not too long ago about the whole mental health piece. When I also think about that, I meant to say this earlier. Also, religion comes into play with that. How many times when people say, "Oh, just try Jesus, He'll work it out for you," and I think that's also another big thing as to why we don't get help. But I think the reason for the N word is also going back to that is the fact that it's a lived experience.
Yes. What about you, Mr. Andrew? What do you think?
When talking about the N word, and I heard some pretty good responses. My take on it is this. I think, well, I won't even say I think. I believe that it's a cultural difference. Like I won't say every black person, but most black people use that word in a they use it two ways. They use it in reference to, like Mr. Christian said, when I get mad, it kind of comes out in my language. And then you use it, in a more friendly aspect, to address, your brother or whatever the case may be. But I think it's done in a cultural essence. So just like black people use that, in a cultural essence. Hey, my Ian, what's up? Hey, same as white people. White people have a cultural essence of using that word, and it's more in a negative aspect than how black people are using it, but it's done culturally. So that it's a cultural difference between us two. And I always refer back to this. We breed a lot of cultures. Look at music, for instance. White people like a lot of black music. So it's a cultural thing. Like, man, it's almost like, well, why can you just have it and I can't? Why can't I be a part of it too? Why can't I say what you say? Why can't I listen to what you listen to? Why can't I do what you guys do? So it's for me, I kind of look at it as a cultural thing, because when you look at the narrative behind it and the effects of it, racism it's not learned, it's taught. So it's been taught for years because that was their culture of it. We, again, have a different culture. Same thing, but it's a different culture how we use it. I think you also have to be in a position where you've been in a situation where a white person has called you that word. And I've been in that situation. And in the beginning, yeah, immediately your temper, you kind of lose it and you're mad because they called you that. But once growth kind of takes place in your life and you start to educate yourself more, neither side really knows what the meaning of that word is. Like I said, it's a cultural thing. So white people using it, they don't know the meaning behind it. So knowing that, I don't get mad at it, because it doesn't bother me. I know you want to be part of the culture. So I think that, when you think about that word, you got to understand, what kind of validity it holds in both cultures.
Yes, and I want to ask you this. Why do you think they don't know the meaning of the word? Your opinion. Why do you think that?
Never been educated on it. Never been educated on it. So, if you look at the N word, it means ignorant, and that's almost like, I think somebody just gave the example, if you call a girl a B word, she's automatically upset. But her friends can call her that because it means something different when they say it. So a white person calling me an N word, I know I'm not ignorant. I'm very well educated, but you don't know that. So because you don't know that, you stereotype me, which makes you look ignorant in return. So there's no reason for me to get upset about it because I know you're not educated enough to know what that means. And plus, you don't know me well enough to be able to say that. So again, those are some things that over time, as you grow and you kind of understand and become more aware, those things don't bother me.
Mr. George, I want to hear from you.
I think a lot of times it's not necessarily that they don't understand. I think it's the fact that they want to portray that they don't understand so they can have some type of way to interact with the word. And so a lot of times they want to tell you what they want it to mean for you versus us tell them exactly what it means. And at that point, that's when they get offended. Because most of the time, I would say we know what the word means to us and what it means to our community. And for you to tell us and say that you're entitled to say, I think that's what brings the discourse and where we want to have that conversation about where you don't need to use the word. And it's similar to like when you have like different fraternities and sororities that have their different sacred things they can do, as well as anybody that has their own set of customs. So I mean, I think it just boils down to, you know, things belonging to certain cultures and being okay with the fact that, you know, sometimes you just can't share, you just have to appreciate it from a distance.
Right. Absolutely. So that is it, you guys. So thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. We will keep this conversation going on what it means to be a Black man in America. So thank you guys so much for being a part of this conversation. Great conversation here. And I hope this inspires others to start having these conversations together. So thank you guys again. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for having me. I definitely appreciate it.
Thank you. Anytime.
Yes,
Thank you.
Anytime. Now, before we end, where can my audience follow you on social media? I will start with Mr. Christian first.
So you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at soon to be EDD. Trying to finish up my doctorate, so it's very easy to remember. So just go ahead and follow me there.
Right. What about you, KJ?
My Instagram and Twitter both the same, KJ Johnson the second, with the second being the two I's at the end.
And Mr. Andrew.
Yes, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Speak to Ed.
And for me,
Mr. George.
Oh, and for me, you can follow me on Instagram. It's 07 Joker G.
Right. So thank you guys again, and I will catch you guys later on. So thank you for being a part of this conversation. Thank you.